Okay, this is my first video ever for YouTube, and it's about a new weapon I recently bought, and this is a relatively new model, Walther CCP. Unfortunately, I have to report some problems with it, some manufacturing problems, and some, in my opinion, quite serious design flaws of this weapon. So, let's start with the manufacturing problems. By the way, I bought this gun because I really love how this gun feels in hand. The grip is extremely comfortable, the gun is compact, and the new system, or relatively old new system of the gas piston seemed quite interesting to me, so I had this gun in a shop and I thought that is really nice. Unfortunately, then I started to find some very unpleasant things about this weapon. So let's first talk about the manufacturing errors. Let's take the gun apart. It's not that complicated. Oh, of course, first I have to check it. Nothing in the chamber. It's relatively easy to take apart. So, the first problem is about this part. This is the least serious problem, and it's about this part. And the problem is that, I hope you can see it. When you're moving the trigger, this part wiggles quite a lot in the hole. I hope you can see it. This part wiggles quite a lot. That means that it was too short, that this bit should be longer, a few millimeters longer. And also, if you look closely, the hole for the bit isn't well centered in the plastic pillar for it. It's actually quite off-centered. This toothpick. This wall of it is quite thin, and this movement in connection with the one thin wall really it could happen that the bit could wiggle its way out from the weapon after some time. So solution is easy: make this bit a bit longer and make sure that you manufacture the hole for the bit really in the center of the plastic pillar. The second problem is that the ejector is a very loose part. I have never seen any gun with an ejector so loose, and it's not only loose in this direction, it's also loose sideways too. And this thing really doesn't provoke any feelings of confidence. It's just a little loose bit. The third most unpleasant manufacturing problem is that the channel for the striker is completely cut through, and we have a huge 3 centimeters long crack, and effectively this part of the slide is held in place just at the ends of it, and against this part the rounds press when they are in the magazine, so this part really should be much firmer and shouldn't be held in place just at its two ends. If I can shine a flashlight there, I can hope you will be able to see the crack, to see the light coming through. I will move the striker back. You can see the crack quite easily now. I think it's quite unacceptable error. I really hate this thing. It makes the whole slide less rigid, less durable. Unacceptable thing in my opinion. I'm really disappointed by this. And now we are slowly getting to the design problems. This gun is slightly unconventional. In most of the weapons you will find the block in the front, and the block is functional all the time, unless you press the trigger. Here the block is in the rear part of the slide and works only if the striker is cocked. When the striker is not cocked, it protrudes out of the slide, and it's not very loose there. If I could push it so that you can see how firm it is, I really can't describe you. It's really firm there. I measured the force it takes to push it in, and it's over half kilo pressure. It's approaching 600 grams to be able to push the striker back. So it's quite firmly protruding out. So when the striker isn't cocked, the striker is forward and is protruding from the slide. The block is only effective when the striker is cocked, is in the rear position, so it only functions now. Well, how does the gun work? When the slide is forward, the block is in this position and is down and is effective. When you pull the trigger, you can see that the part is moving up and the block is removed from the striker, and the striker can fall down. You can also see the sear coming down. So when you pull the trigger, the sear comes down, and this part where the block rests goes higher. When the slide travels back, you can see that the raised part is all the way back. So all the way back, the block is ineffective. Let me explain how the gun works. When the gun is cocked, the striker is held some 1 or 2 millimeters away from the block. The striker sits against the sear, and when we start pulling the slide back, the striker will go in contact with the block. Unfortunately, the block at the moment is still active and will allow the striker to lose contact with the sear and ride some way away from it. And after approximately this amount of travel, the block finally deactivates and lets the striker impact the sear. And this impact is occurring while there is no active block in the way of the striker. So we are pulling the live round from the chamber. We let the striker impact the sear, and we have no active block in the way. Each time you're pulling the slide back, the striker receives these impacts, and after all these hundreds and thousands of impacts, we can easily imagine that the striker could disintegrate. Keep in mind that the striker is not a machined part, it's injection molded part. So I think the quality of it is somewhat questionable. So the disintegration of it after receiving hundreds and thousands of these impacts is quite possible. And when it happens, when it disintegrates, for example, this tooth breaks off, it will just travel forward and it will hit the primer, and the live round will explode from the chamber. So I think this is the first really not nice part about this gun regarding its safety, because we allow the striker receiving these impacts while we have no active block in its way, and the round really could potentially explode from the ejection port. Okay, so if you have this gun, you have already noticed that when the striker is cocked, or each time you pull the slide back, you get these weird clicks, and each click is the impact of the striker against the sear, while there is no effective block in the way that could stop the striker hitting the primer should it ever disintegrate after all these impacts. So this part of movement, the striker and sear are still in contact. Now the movement comes much harder, because now we are compressing two springs in the same time, the recoil spring and the striker spring, and we are starting to ride the sear from the striker from the sear, and when it clicks, the block finally deactivates and lets the striker hit the sear. So again, striker and seal in contact all the time. Now they lost contact, and now the striker impacted the sear. Let's measure the force it takes to push the protruding firing pin back into the slide. When the slide is closed, you will have to believe me that the movement starts between 550 and ends at 600 grams, more or less. When we place the slide more back and put more tension on the spring of the striker, we will repeat the measurement. You're going to repeat the measurement. The pencil pushes against the firing pin. Let's do it again. It goes to something like 1.4 kilos. So the range is practically from 600 grams to 1.4 kilos. Now I finally got to the reason why I did this video and to the most serious problem of this gun. As I have shown you, it takes quite a lot of force to push the striker back in the slide. In this situation it takes 600 grams. When the slide comes comes back, it can take up to 1.4 kilos. So the more the slide is back, the firmer the striker protrudes, and the crucial question is it possible to load the round in the chamber when the firing pin still protrudes from the slide? Let's try it. Let's try it now. We can see the pin protruding, and now we are unfortunately chambering the round with the firing pin firmly protruding. The pin was hitting against the primer. Now it rests on the primer. It pushes against it with a force of 600 grams, and of course if the gun didn't fire up to this point, it could fire any time you drop the gun, for example. This gun is now in the state it is no drop safety. This gun is dangerous. You really, when you want to load this gun, you really have to be absolutely sure that you move the slide all the way to the rear. Unfortunately, it's not matter of the fractions of the millimeter. Let me do it again. It takes good 2 millimeters after the slide lets the round pop up. Now, and only at this moment, the striker caught on the sear, and you can see it's quite a lot, quite a way back. So by the normal manipulations of the normal manipulation of the gun, you can make it very unsafe. And this is a great problem. And the other problem connected with that, with the normal manipulation of the gun, you can think that the gun will fire when you will need that. Unfortunately, not only will the gun be dangerous because the striker will rest against the primer, but of course the striker is not cocked, and you have no way of telling if the striker is cocked or not. There is no indication on this gun which tells you if the striker is cocked or not. With the normal basic manipulation of this gun, you can make the striker to hit the primer. You can make the striker to push against the primer, to be constantly in contact with it, to make this gun unsafe in the case when you drop it. And this is a really great problem in my opinion. It's a great design oversight that the gun can chamber around before actually the striker gets held in this proper position, and the striker can hit the primer while chambering around and pushes against the primer, touches the primer. The gun is not safe. Unfortunately, Walther CCP is not a safe gun.